Hello and welcome to another episode of the Career Reset podcast. You might hear that my voice sounds a little bit different because for what feels like the millionth time this year, I am sick, and it's quite funny that many people warned me that when my child starts daycare, we will be all sick all the time. But my child hasn't even started daycare yet. She's starting at the beginning of April, and already I am all the time sick with all kinds of different sicknesses, and I am happy that it's me and not my daughter, but it still feels like my body is really testing me, and I'm not 100% fit. Like, I cannot, for example, exercise, and I need to sleep a lot, and I just want to be at home under blankets. But it's also not this kind of sick where I couldn't physically get out of bed. And as an entrepreneur, that is quite hard to navigate whether I am sick enough to take a sick day or not. Because to tell you the truth, when I was an employee and I could have fully paid sick days, it didn't take much thinking whether or not I will take the sick day. And even as an entrepreneur, actually in Finland, because I'm paying this social insurance, I'm actually entitled to have paid sick day, but I need to always get a doctor's notice. So I would need to go to a doctor. The doctor would assess whether or not I am capable of working. Well, often they kind of just ask you, how do you feel? And now I have some kind of flu or a bit of a cough. But I could say, for example, that a big part of my work is talking to clients or recording, and with a sore throat that is a bit hard. So they would give me the sick day, but I don't want to go to a doctor. So you get a bit of entrepreneurial struggles here in the intro. So how I have been navigating it is that if I feel well enough to get out of bed and sit at my table, I do that and I start working. And if at some point I just feel like, no, I actually do feel really sick, I just lie down, and if I have any sessions, I reschedule them, because I always want to give my clients 100% of me, and if I'm not able to do that, then I would rather reschedule the session. So that has been my year, basically. Towards the end of last year, I started exercising again much more, and I just felt so good, like physically, mentally. I was less tired, I felt much stronger, and I try to keep up with it, but it's very tiring to be in this cycle of finally build up the routine. I start going to gym, start exercising regularly, and I feel really good, and then I'm sick. So we're back to zero, and then I need to restart it and find the motivation to start again. And for me, it's much easier to find the motivation when I'm already in the routine. When I know that these 3 days I go to the gym, then I don't think about it that much. But when I'm sick, and then I need to start thinking, okay, now am I healthy enough to go to the gym? But I really don't feel like it, because I was just like sitting in my apartment for a week. So let me know, please, if you can relate. If your year has also started with feeling sick, then I send you a lot of well wishes, and I hope you feel better. I also hope that I feel better, but I actually feel fine. I would not want to preach that if you feel sick, you should be recording podcasts, but I feel good enough to do that. And if at some point while recording this episode I lose my voice completely, then I will of course stop and record it some other time. Anyway, on to today's topic. So today, as I promised in the last episode, I am following up a little bit on the very common feeling that clients seek me out with, which is feeling stuck. And last week I talked about feeling stuck as in feeling lack of progress, feeling like you haven't really been moving forward in your career, whether you can't seem to get to the more senior level where you would want to get, or even into some leadership position, what might be the causes of it. So if you feel like that is your case, then definitely check out the last episode. And if you haven't heard it yet, I really recommend it, because I will be following up a little bit on it in this episode. So we are still talking today about feeling stuck, but now we are talking more about being stuck in the quote-unquote wrong field, which is something that I hear quite a lot. almost more often than people coming to me when they feel stuck, as in lack of progress. It's definitely the fear that they are in a wrong field, that they somehow got themselves on a wrong path, and that can be from like external perspective. So worrying that, for example, they are in a field that AI is gonna take over, or internally, so they're in a field that just does not feel aligned, and they are worried that if they stay even longer, then it will define their background even more, and it will make it even harder to move on to something that would feel more aligned. And to make things a bit more complicated, I actually don't believe that there is something like inherently good or inherently bad field when it comes to our careers. It all depends on how good of a fit it is to us, to our goals. It changes wildly in the world. Some fields maybe a few years ago were considered very lucrative, while now that is no longer so much the case. If we think, for example, about software development, when I started working as a recruiter 4 years ago, then software development was like the field that if you were a developer, if you were a coder, then companies were fighting over you and paying you crazy money, which to some extent is still the case if you are a more senior, like you have a good tech stack, you know a lot of languages, you know some cloud technologies and so on. But if you are someone who kind of jumped on the train right around this time, and you, for example, started studying software engineering or computer science, and then you expected that you will graduate, and that's the situation you will walk into. Well, as we hear from all the news, for very junior software engineers, it's actually really tough in the job market, and they really struggle to find a job because the market inevitably got quite saturated. And also that is a field where AI is playing a pretty big role, and we heard a lot of different predictions of what kind of jobs are going to be automated or replaced by artificial intelligence. And for example, the software engineering, development, coding was not one that many of us would have put our bets on, and yet that seems to be the case now. And AI affecting our jobs is definitely something I want to talk about in this episode, because although I did not expect it, it's already something that my clients are bringing up into the sessions, this fear, or even actually some evidence coming in that either they are expected to use AI, or like clients or employers just don't value the work they do that much anymore, and they want to make sure that they stay relevant in the job market, and they wonder what they should do about it. So that's what I'm going to be talking about here. So that basically brings me to the topic that we just cannot define some field that it is inherently really good and very promising for the future based on like how many open jobs there are, how resistant they are to AI and different economical shifts. And if you try to make decisions about the right direction in your career purely based on these factors, first of all, it's super difficult because it's very complex. You would need to have a very good overview of what's actually happening in the job market. You would need to have some excellent forecasting capabilities, being able to actually estimate what jobs are gonna be the thing. And as you probably know, it is not as easy as that you decide to change your field into something better, and then immediately the employers are gonna perceive you as an attractive person for that field. And that is a topic that I discussed with quite many people. For some reason now, data analytics seems to be the field that is perceived like a really good like bet on your future. No doubt that that's a field where a lot of companies have open roles, but what you need to be mindful of is that that is a field where you need a very, very strong technical skill set. You need a lot of years of experience to actually position yourself as a desirable data analyst. But the people that I have spoken with, it was often the case that they were from some business field, and then they took one course on data analytics, and then they were asking me how to position their CV so that they are considered for these data analytics jobs? And the answer is that's just not gonna work. As with any other field, the employers want to see that you have some real experience, and if you do take some courses on the side, well, that is of course nice. That shows that you're someone who values learning and who is maybe even spending their free time on learning, which is great. But in terms of that making you a qualified candidate for these kind of jobs, that simply is not good enough. So if data analytics, for example, sounds like the right field, very exciting, you really want to go all in on that, then you need to go all in on that, which means learning all these different technologies that are valued in the field, working on data analytics projects, maybe even volunteering, doing some kind of unpaid work to get that experience into your CV, building your portfolio, building your network, all that kind of stuff. As in any other field, it is true as well. It doesn't mean that because lots of companies are looking for data analysts that they are willing to hire someone who is completely junior and they will train you. That is in this economy, for example, in Finland, where we have very high unemployment and lots of very skilled people on the market, the companies absolutely do not need to hire people without existing experience and train them. They will have a good pool of people who actually do already have that experience. And then what happens if in a few years suddenly data analytics is the field that actually the AI capabilities have gotten to the point where they can take over a lot of the things that a human used to do previously? Then you are in a way back to zero, and you again need to look out and guess what's the right field, and you are all the time playing this catch of you recognize that some area is doing really well, so you start taking steps towards getting into that area, and by the time you are actually like a solid professional in that field, the world has moved on and you need to start from zero. So this kind of like a hamster wheel approach to career is something I definitely do not recommend. And I really think like any kind of long-term career planning and making any kind of bets what is gonna be the thing in the long term, we can just throw that out of the window, because that's not gonna get you anywhere. You will just spend your whole career chasing and never actually getting into that place where you are on a good career path and you are a valued professional in your field. And it always surprises me how people can make very big career decision based on very little information. So I am someone who has a very good overview of the job market. As a former recruiter, as a career coach, it is part of my job to stay on top of trends, stay on top of what's happening in the job market. I speak to hundreds and hundreds of people about their career, about their field. Not just my clients, but in general, I make sure that I talk to people who work in different companies, different fields, and I ask them what's actually happening. So I would say compared to an average person, I have a really strong overview of what's happening in the job market, and yet I would never feel qualified enough to tell someone that you should go into this field, because that is now the thing that is the hit where things are happening and jobs are opening up. And meanwhile, I talk to people who heard, they don't even know from whom, that they should become this and that, because that's a field where the salaries are really high. Basically, anyone who is trying to give you advice about what's the field you should go into, you should take a really critical look at their overview of the field and most probably not act on the advice. It's like with my father-in-law. He reads a lot of news and stuff, and he gives my husband quite a lot of advice on what career path he should get into. And even though it's coming from very good intentions, it's also coming from just lack of real understanding of what's happening in the market. So I would say, especially if your parents, if you're well-meaning parents who care about your happiness and care about your career, and they show that by giving you advice about what kind of field you should get into, most probably you can take it as one opinion, but do not base your next career steps on that opinion. And I completely understand that we are all living in this uncertainty, and we would just love if someone told us that if you do this, it's gonna work out 100%. There is no chance of it being a failure. This is the field in which once you get into it, you will be well paid. Employers are gonna fight to get you, and everything is gonna be great. But that's not the case, and that's the world we need to learn to live in, with this inherent and constant uncertainty, where no shortcuts exist and nobody knows what's gonna happen in the future. So we cannot make any kind of strong bets on what's actually gonna happen. But by saying this, I don't mean that all we can do is basically stand still and watch this AI and economy wave wash over us and be completely powerless and just keep our fingers crossed that it's not gonna have that negative impact on our career. That is not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is that we need to move forward. We need to keep learning, reinventing ourselves. We need to basically work hard to stay relevant on the job market. But all this action and all these decisions cannot come from some bets on the future, from some external factors, because we're going to be pulled in 100 different directions. So what to do instead? If you worry that you are stuck in the wrong field, in a field that will be replaced by automation, then you always need to look inwards into what actually interests you, what field are you drawn into right now, trying to wrap it as in what would be the smart choice in terms of the economy and the world. You can only think of what would be the smart choice in terms of what seems to be the most interesting next step for you right now. And that is the second aspect of when people feel like they are stuck in the wrong field. Although this fear about the future is there, what more often happens is that you just feel like it's not 100% the right fit for you, what you're doing right now. And that if you think about your future and you think that you would be stuck in this field in the long term, it just does not seem very appealing. And there are different reasons why we can end up in this situation. Sometimes a field that initially sounds very exciting, and then when we work in it for a few years, we realize that, okay, this is like, I feel like I've seen it all, I've done it all, and now I want to move on to something else. That has definitely happened to me with recruitment. It used to be for many years the thing what I really wanted to do. Like, my dream job was to work in the recruitment. I can't now even explain why, but it just was what I wanted to do. And I am glad I did, because from that experience I could start my career coaching business and actually give reliable advice to my clients. So no regrets there. But about 1 year into that job, I realized that it's a very repetitive job. And because I worked in recruitment consulting, that is a very fast-paced. You are exposed to lots of different roles, lots of different companies that you externally work with, and I was learning so much, but I was also starting to feel like that any next project will be something I have already done and I will just repeat the same steps. And recruitment is really a field which could be considered safe, like companies will need to recruit people, and even though, for example, the tools and the practices that recruiters use will probably change in the future as the technology evolves, but at its core, it's a job where it's kind of the same. There is not many areas where you can develop. Maybe you can eventually hire for harder roles, or I actually worked in headhunting where I actively had to go out and find people and convince them to join this or that company, which is considered in a way the peak of recruitment in terms of, for example, what is the most lucrative financially field of recruitment. But then speaking of some kind of seniority, well, then you can just become like a team lead of recruiters, and that is pretty much it. And I'm sure that there would have been much more that I could still experience and learn, but if I was thinking just internally, the feeling was, well, okay, I've done this and what next? I want to do something else. And at the same time, on paper, if you are a recruiter, then what do you do? It's not a field that is directly transferable or translatable in something else. Of course, you have a lot of transferable skills like communication with internal, external people. Especially when working in recruitment consulting, you need to have very good project management skills. I would be able to communicate that skill set in terms of something else, but it requires much more thinking. It is not as directly applicable to other companies, and at the same time, if I was a recruiter for a recruitment agency, and I could go like in-house to work in that kind of environment, which would be a bit different in any company. Even though the job title is the same, it's a bit different, and it's shaped by the people you work with and the processes the company has, but it's very core at the day-to-day level of you doing your job, it's the same. So I'm happy that I was able to recognize that, and when I was at that crossroads that I would either continue or I started something new, I decided to go for something new, because if I think that right now I would have been not in a very different place than I was 3 years ago. I would just be a recruiter with 3 more years of experience, and hopefully a higher salary, but instead I'm now in a completely different place with a completely different skill set, and I would say much more better outlook into the future in terms of having experience with entrepreneurship and lots of different other things. So it can be a bit of an identity crisis when for years you work towards working in a certain field or a company, and then you are in it and you feel like, okay, this is not actually it, but it is extremely common. So if that is your case, if you work towards being in a certain place and now you're in it and it doesn't feel as great as you thought it would, nothing has gone wrong. This is just a completely normal part of our careers. So don't try to shove that feeling down and tell yourself that, come on, let's focus on the positives, and this is what I wanted for so long. That is the essential skills we will all need in our careers, is the ability to constantly reinvent ourselves. And the faster you can do that, the better. That is something I do a lot with my clients. Obviously, when people come to me, they don't come to tell me that everything in their career is going beautifully. Of course, there is always some kind of problem or some kind of need they have. But then people often come to me when they're in this phase that they recognize that something needs to be done about their career, that they really are not happy where they are, but they are a bit overwhelmed by the thought what it would take, which I often help them to de-escalate. My coaching packages are 3 months long, and in that 3 months we achieve like a full career transition. It really is not something that would require years and years of work, but I often see that the clients are exactly in this awareness that I'm not in the right spot, but at the same time they try to convince me, but more actually themselves, that this is fine, nothing is that wrong, and I'm happy I at least have some kind of steady job, and maybe some other field would be exactly the same and I wouldn't enjoy it either. And maybe that is true, but that doesn't mean that we cannot try to strive for something better, and maybe in the process we will learn lots of other things and lots of other possibilities we could take in our career. But as I mentioned, I don't believe that you can be inherently stuck in the wrong field, but you can definitely make yourself stuck if you realize that where I'm now is not the right fit, but I refuse to do anything about it. Because if that goes on for a very long time, then it's harder to dig yourself out of it, and you have wasted a lot of time that could be used more productively in exploring the next best step, in taking maybe even small steps that could compound into some very, very exciting career path. So if you are in this phase of kind of having the awareness that it's not 100% right where you are at right now, but you are talking yourself out of taking action and you're scared what it would actually mean to have some big career transition, I want to highly encourage you to book a free intro call with me, because you can talk me through what's happening, and I can give you this higher level overview of de-escalating that fear that you are stuck and that you're in the wrong field. I can give you a very clear plan of what that kind of career transition would look like in your specific case. And even if you know that you don't like doing this, but you have no clue what you would like to do instead, then especially I want to encourage you to book that free intro call with me, because that is exactly what we dive into. It's 1 hour long, and by the end of it you will have a much better idea of what are the alternatives that you could be considering. You can fill out a very short form that I link in the description, where you just tell me a little bit about your situation so that I can prepare for the call, and then I send you a link to my calendar. You book it, we can get together and actually talk about what's happening. And if we then work together, as I mentioned, like I work maximum 3 months with my clients, and by that time they have completed their career transition basically. I work with people in different fields, in tech, business, marketing, sales, data analytics, people who work in academia, people who work in social services, like a very wide range. And I have yet to meet a client who would be so deeply stuck in their situation that I would tell them it's gonna take years and additional degrees and lots of work to get out of it. So if you just want to feel calm about your situation, then booking that call with me is a very good thing to do. So as I mentioned, one way that you can end up in this situation where you just feel like this is not it, I'm in the wrong area here, can be by pursuing something that you maybe didn't have the completely objective or completely correct expectations of what the field looks like. But the second path is that you can, without even wanting to, you somehow end up in a field in which you were never supposed to end up. And that actually happens quite a lot with people who work in startups, or not even startups. I actually had one client last year working for a very big Finnish corporation. But as we are living through quite uncertain economic times, a lot of companies are doing layoffs. And after layoffs, there almost always is some kind of restructuring, that different teams get merged together under a different unit. People are shuffled around. The people who stay maybe end up working in a completely different team. And you are often put in the position that if you want to stay, then you will need to join a different team and do some different task. And in this economy, it's not a very smart thing to say, you know what, no, I'm just gonna leave this steady paycheck and go out into the 10% unemployment job market. So if you were put into this decision moment where it was either you go or you stay doing something you don't want to do, then like don't blame yourself for staying. It's a normal survival mechanism, and you can still benefit from being in that steady position to plant some seeds to move to something that would feel more aligned with what you truly want. And I can very much relate to this, because that was again a situation that happened to me, that I worked in a startup and I was originally hired to do operations, establish processes in HR, in finance, in accounting. And the startup, as in any startup, got into a situation where money started running out. So everyone quite frantically started focusing on sales. And I was like put on the spot to decide whether I want to continue with the company, because I had a temporary contract and they told me that they will extend it only if I work fully in sales. And I already had a hunch that that is not a field in which I want to work into, especially since the sales in question was doing cold calling and the company didn't have any good processes or any track record of this actually working for them. But I told myself that okay, here is a steady paycheck, and here is a lot of uncertainty, so I'll rather take the steady paycheck. And what do I know, maybe I will actually like working in sales. Well, it did not happen, at least not in that kind of sales, and it eventually anyway led to my contract being terminated, because I did not enjoy the work at all. I had no motivation to get better at it. I wasn't good at it. So eventually I'm very happy that that decision was made for me, because especially as a junior employee, without any kind of safety net, any kind of network, any kind of personal brand, I would have nothing to lean on. But I was happy that I was in the end forced to go back out there and figure out my next step, because I probably wouldn't have had that courage to do it by myself. And I hear that very, very often, that you are hired to do one thing, and in the interview process there is that discussion that what you're gonna do. But then the reality is a bit different from the expectations, or then after these bigger changes you just end up doing something you don't really want to do, but you tell yourself, okay, it's a job, I'm gonna do this, and maybe in a few months I could go back to what I actually enjoy. But then months go by and years go by, and you just keep doing the same thing, and there is no indication of you being able to move to something else. And then naturally that fear starts coming up that okay, now I have this job title in my CV, and now I have this job title for a year, for 2 years, for 3 years, for 5 years. What is a recruiter gonna think when they see my CV where it says that for 5 years I have done this, but it's not what I want to do? How am I gonna explain that I want to do something else? How can I be even considered for something else than this? And that is definitely a tricky situation to be in, and ideally you're not gonna get into this situation in the first place. I feel like there is a actually third way how you can end up there, and that is that you have some kind of job, some kind of role that you're supposed to do, but then you have a boss who keeps coming to you and who keeps asking you, and could you also do this, and could you also do that? And it's not really the scope of the work you're supposed to do. Things that your boss doesn't want to do and nobody else wants to do, but you don't have the confidence to say no. You want to be perceived as someone who always say yes and who's always up for the challenge, but then you keep doing this and you slowly become like the admin person that handles everybody else's annoying tasks, and that doesn't look very good on a CV. That doesn't really look as someone who could be considered for more senior role. So pay attention in your day-to-day job, that are you someone who keeps saying yes to even things that are not even close to what you want to do, but you don't want to look like the troublemaker, and you don't want to be in an uncomfortable situation, so you rather say yes to everything. And even when I say that, try to not get into this situation in the first place. In careers, everything is fixable. Like, you never become so doomed that there would be no exciting career path for you. I have helped people from the situations that seemed the most dire, and even though on paper they really felt like they have nothing to offer to the job market, we were able to create the right strategy, and we were able to figure out what they want to do and make a plan how they could get it. But my main advice here is, as soon as you start feeling like your day-to-day job is deteriorating or going into wrong direction from what you genuinely want, you need to think, okay, I am in this situation. It's not gonna get fixed by itself. Careers never get fixed by itself. Your boss will never come to you one day and out of nowhere present the perfectly aligned role to you. You always need to take the action. You always need to do something about it. And the sooner you start, the shorter time it will take, and the faster you will get out of what feels to you like the wrong field to the right field. And what I also want to talk about is the importance of owning your narrative and owning your career story, because there is what you have done and what you know. Like, you are the only person that knows the 100% reality of your job, of the company in which you work, and you know the truth, but it's not always so beneficial to expose this entire truth to the world, which does not mean lying, but it means only sharing the information that is relevant and that will help you get to your next job. So if we are thinking about you describing your work experience in your CV, the point is not that you give 100% detailed description of everything that has happened and everything you have done and have not done. The point is that you share what from your experience would be the most relevant, the most exciting to a potential employer. And I often talk to people who just feel like something has gone wrong with them, or they are not enough, and then they have that mindset when they are writing their CV or when they go into an interview. They approach it as that they need to hide something from the potential employer, because if the potential employer knew the whole truth, they would definitely not offer them the job. And I mean, often what you perceive is just that. Most probably the situation in your company is something that is very common in other companies, or I often hear from people that they are worried to put like this company in their CV because the company has a really bad reputation. And then I say, okay, can you tell me the name of the company? And it's a company that either I have never heard about even, and as I said, I'm someone who has a really good overview, especially of the local job market in Finland. It's very rare that you say a company and I have never heard about it, unless it's some startup that was established a week ago. And most probably I even know someone who works in that company. Finland is a very small world, and there are definitely companies that do have bad reputation for one way or another, but that is something that then harms the reputation, for example, of the founders or of the top leadership, but not of you specifically as being an employee in that company. But most probably it's just that you are in the company, you see that things are being handled maybe not the way that is right or sometimes even legal, but that is not information that is publicly available. So the fact that you have a negative perception of your current employer or past employer doesn't mean that it is generally known fact in the job market. And in recruitment, it always comes down to you, who you are, what you have done, and of course the context in which you did your work matter. And sometimes having a famous company in your CV can be a bit of a help, but it is a very small percentage of what makes up your background and your attractiveness to the job market and to any given role. So I really want to challenge that most probably the reputation of your company to a potential employer is either nothing or very neutral, that it's just some kind of company. And I remember I once worked with a client who had exactly this kind of fear, that she didn't even want to apply for jobs because she worried that if the recruiter would see that she worked for that specific company, that they would immediately reject her. And it was some kind of construction company, like really something that had zero reputation. And once we could talk it through and I asked her, where is this fear of bad reputation coming from? And she said that, the company is a total mess, like nothing works, nobody knows what they are doing. And I assured her that, okay, but that is just internal knowledge, that is something that and a potential employer really doesn't care if the company you work for right now is a mess. They care about what you have achieved, what projects you have worked on, and if you manage that in a challenging environment, then just better for you, because it means you would be able to handle some kind of challenging situations in your next job. So in general, I think that people judge very harshly what their background looks on paper, because it really depends how you actually word it. That is something I do with my clients, that I review their LinkedIn profiles and their CV and their applications, and I make sure that they really hype themselves up, they sell the best of what they have to offer, and we leave out everything else. Not because we are trying to lie to a potential employer, but because to a potential employer, most probably it is just not relevant what's happening in the company in which you are working at the moment. So I always say that you are not the victim of your CV, of your background, you're the author of it. And learning the skill of communicating your background in a way that is relevant to what you want to do as your next big step is one super valuable skill that is gonna carry you really far in your career, and something I spend a lot of time teaching my clients. So if you feel like any of these cases describes you, that you really feel like you're in the wrong field, you are doing something that you in the long term don't want to do, then I hope that this episode gave you the awareness and the confirmation that is a legitimate reason to start considering the next step. That's great that you have a steady job and that it's a job that is like fine, you don't hate every single aspect of it, but if you zoom out a little bit and if you think that should it be something you do until retirement and you don't feel very excited about that prospect, then it is definitely time to do something about it. And the first and most important step is to think about what to do instead. So before you start frantically applying for jobs and doing a bunch of random things, it is very, very important to just pause and think that if the field you're in right now, if the company, if the job, if whatever is not the right fit for you, then think what would be the right fit for you. And as I have mentioned, I consider the only relevant lens to look at it is from your internal interest. What draws you, what sounds interesting to you, and forget everything about what would be the smart field to get into. That is such a myth and overall an absolute nonsense and a path to a very unfulfilling career of constantly chasing what's the smart field to get into. Just trust that your interests are legitimate, that if some field draws you, if you really want to explore it, it doesn't mean that you will immediately start getting a degree in that field or throw away all your past, but at least allow yourself to explore it, allow yourself to learn about the field, to meet people who are working there, to browse open jobs and see what it would be like. And by actually starting to do all this, you are shaping a better understanding of what's available, what are the jobs out there, what would be the right next step for you. And then with every single piece of information that you gather from this research, you can build a much better decision around what would be the next best step for you. So what I'm trying to say in this episode, that you know what you want, you know what you don't want, and you cannot force yourself into being interested in a certain field if you just are not. That is another common trap with when people tell me I want to get into software development because software developers have really good money, and I say, okay, like, does it sound like an interesting field to you? Is it something that you really would want to work in? And they tell me, well, like, no, but maybe if I tried, I would start being interested in it. There are many things you can trick yourself into, and you can power through with some self-discipline, but forcing yourself to be interested in something in which you are not interested is just never gonna work. And it's not even the point of a career. You can't have it all on a day-to-day basis, that every single work day feels like an absolute dream and you're learning and progressing and having a ton of fun. But in general, it is possible to have it all. It is possible to have a career that gives you a lot of purpose, that is meaningful, that is interesting to you, that pays you well. In any field, it is possible to be considered an attractive person to the job market. And I also want to highlight how super brave it is to have a job and say out loud, or even say to yourself, like, this is not it. I am in the wrong field. I need to do something else. Because what often happens when we bring this up to maybe our friends, our spouse, or someone, not very often are we met with a lot of encouragement and excitement. Especially in this economy, when we say this, people tend to almost discourage us from trying anything new, because they might say, now it's not a very good time to change jobs, you should be happy you even have that kind of job. I feel like many people bring up a lot of cynicism in this kind of situation. For example, when my friends are talking to me, like, not to me as a coach, but to me as a friend, and they tell me that they haven't been very happy in their job lately, and then they start saying, but it's job. Nobody likes their job. Nobody enjoys their job. We all just do it because we have to pay our bills. And I so do not agree with that. Like, that is not the way I think of our careers. I think our job can be a huge source of life satisfaction. The job itself can give us a lot of purpose, opportunities to grow, opportunities to learn. It can give us the tools to live a very fulfilling life. But I do not believe in this, like, haha, all jobs suck kind of mentality, because it's just not true. I know enough people, I have helped enough people to get into really exciting jobs that feel like a true expression of who they are, what are their values. They get to grow, they get to learn, they get to earn a lot of money, which is great, and they can then enjoy in their free time. But it's not so, okay, I slave off from Monday to Friday so that I can enjoy my weekend. That is absolutely not the way I approach like my life, my career, my work with my clients, because it's just an absolute nonsense. So what's my main goal with this episode is to de-escalate the feeling of an absolute doom that you can feel if you have, for example, spent a lot of time and money getting a degree in a certain field and finding a job in that field, and then you realize that that's not the right thing for you. I just want to assure you that that is fine and nothing very dramatic has happened. And although it can be associated with a bit of personal crisis and identity crisis when a job that was supposed to be the thing for you is not the thing for you, you need to start taking an action on, but it is an absolutely solvable problem. So but it takes courage to admit it to yourself, to admit it to people around you, and then it's all about what are you gonna do about it? Every single one of us is gonna have to inevitably go through several career transitions in the course of our careers, because that's just the way the world works right now. It's just way too fast, and if we work in any kind of business and tech field, we cannot just sit and wait and hope that any kind of technological advancement is going to pass us by, and any kind of economical instability is not going to define our career to any level. But then it's all about, okay, so what are we going to do about it? And that's what career coaching is all about. That's what I do with my clients, that we don't just talk about what's not working and what would work better, but then we actually think, okay, and what are we gonna do about it? And I can assure you that unless you want to work in some highly regulated field that really requires a university degree, like law, medicine, and I don't know what else, there are that many fields that absolutely crucially require a degree. Your career transition and you getting out of a field that feels wrong at the moment is gonna require much less effort and much less time than you might be fearing. But the sooner you start, the sooner you just acknowledge it and are willing to go for it, the sooner you're gonna land in the destination that feels much more aligned with who you are and what you want. And I can guarantee that the only thought you're gonna have is, why didn't I do this sooner? That is the only thing. I don't regret any of my past jobs. I am completely fine with everything that has happened, but the only thing I think is that I could have, as soon as I acknowledged this is not the right thing for me, to start doing something about it, to start at least exploring the other options, and to admit it to myself that I am not happy with where I am. And I can be at the same time happy that I have at least a steady job, and grateful that I have a paycheck, and grateful for all the things I have in life. And at the same time, I can acknowledge that I want something more, I want something else in my career. It's not like that by pursuing something else, you are disregarding what you have, or you are ungrateful. And most importantly, I really do not understand this opinion that going after something else is risky. There are certain career paths that could be considered risky. If you want to start some kind of capital heavy business and you sell your house and you take all your savings and you put it all on the line, that is potentially risky. But I really can't see any kind of risk with looking what else is out there, thinking about what would be the right career step for you, meeting for a free intro with a career coach to see what perspective they could give you, meeting new people who work in the field in which you want to get into and asking them what it's all about, learning new skills. That is the least risky thing you can do. A real risk is that inherently, if you are in a job that just does not feel right for you, that feels misaligned with what you want, you are not giving 100% to that job, because that's just how it is. So even to something that feels super exciting for us, it's sometimes hard to give it 100% because we have just other things going on. But like naturally your motivation towards your work will fizzle out, and it might get even to a point where, for example, the company will decide to not have you on the payroll anymore because they just don't see that excitement and drive, obviously, because the field in which you work just does not really interest you. And then because you have been ignoring this feeling and shoving it down and trying to be grateful for at least having some kind of job, now you have nothing and you're starting from zero. As I have, for example, in my previous job, recognized that I'm just not like that into recruitment as I thought. I think I still did a really good job, but obviously it showed on my work results and on my motivation and like generally how I was around in the job and how involved I was. So that when layoffs came around, and it was quite obvious that I would be the one to go because I just didn't seem that engaged with the job. So in the long term, it is not safe to just sit and wait in a job that doesn't feel right for you. It's actually very, very risky. So that's what I'm trying to say here, that if you are recognizing that you are not in the right field, that this is not the right thing for you, instead of trying to talk yourself out of it and trying to find the positives, it's time to think about what could be the next step, what you could actually start doing towards figuring out what's the next step, and what could be the first step to actually start some kind of a transition. I'm 30 and I have reinvented my career like 4 times already, and it always took much less than I originally feared. So I'm a master on career transitions personally, helping myself and my clients. To be honest with you, hiring a coach, that is like the easiest thing you can do. That takes all the guesswork out of it, and having someone to talk it through and having someone actually giving you the step-by-step process and figuring out what's the right path for you, you're gonna make your life so much easier by doing this. And as I mentioned, I now work in 3-month packages. So just imagine in 3 months, all this identity crisis and all this feeling of misalignment, it can all be gone, and you can be really sure what's the next step. You can have the strategy, you can already have some interviews booked, you can even have a contract signed, and you can be done with this whole crisis. And often people come to me after they have been struggling in their career for years, like years, and I do not want a single person to waste this precious life on a job that just like feels wrong, feels like a dead end, because I know that I can help you way sooner than you can imagine. And already from our free intro session, you're gonna walk away with so much clarity and so much weight lifted off your shoulders when you talk this through with someone. So as always, in the show notes you will find a link to a very short form that you can fill, that already will help you to think a bit about your career, and it will help me massively to prepare for our intro session, to which I'm gonna invite you, and we can talk through all the topics that I discussed in this podcast, and that I try to make it applicable to many people and talk in general. But you have just spent almost an hour listening to this podcast, so imagine what could happen if you actually spent an hour talking through where your career's at, what are you considering, what's on your mind, and getting that outside perspective of what's actually possible for you and how you could get there. So I hope this was a helpful episode and that it gives you some new perspective on the feeling of being stuck in the wrong field, and how to know what would be actually the right field, the smart field, how to consider the future, but also your internal interests. And so this was like a mini series of 2 episodes of feeling stuck, and let me know what other topics you would like me to cover, because I have so many ideas, but I of course want to make sure that these podcasts are as relevant as possible to you, to where you are in your career, what you want to hear more about. Okay, thank you for listening, and I will talk to you in the next episode.